खाद्य सुरक्षा को सुदृढ़ करने के लिए ज़रूरी है कि कारोबार की सुगमता को भी बेहतर किया जाए। इस बारे में हमसे बातचीत करने के लिए दुनिया के मशहूर ट्रेड इकोनॉमिस्ट डॉक्टर जैदी सत्तार हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं। डॉक्टर जैदी सत्तार बांग्लादेश के चेयरमैन ऑफ पॉलिसी रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट के चेयरमैन भी हैं। डॉक्टर सत्तार, मेरा सवाल आपसे यह है कि अगर हमको न्यूट्रिशन को, खाद्य सुरक्षा को, फूड सिक्योरिटी को स्ट्रॉन्ग करना है तो हमको ट्रेड पॉलिसीज़ को किस तरह बनाना होगा? खासकर साउथ एशियन कंट्रीज़ की अगर हम बात करें तो उनको किस तरह की ट्रेड पॉलिसीज़ को लाना होगा सर?
There is one fundamental proposition on what type of trade policy will improve adequate supply at affordable prices, and that is open. The greater trade is open and less restricted is trade, you will have lower prices in the entire region. Of course, there will be some nuances, some exceptions under certain circumstances. For instance, in the South Asia region, most of the countries are net food deficit countries. India is a net food surplus country. India is a large exporter of staple food. So India's situation is going to be a bit different from Bangladesh situation. For instance, Bangladesh would prefer to have more open, without restrictions on trade when it comes to agri-food products, particularly staple products like rice, onions, potato, and wheat. So when restrictions are imposed on, let's say, exports by India for different reasons, maybe there are domestic compulsions that they have to impose some restriction on export of any particular product, like say onions. What happens is in the region, but in Bangladesh, for instance, which is a net importer of these basic commodities, prices shoot up, and poverty, inflation is affected, poverty levels shoot up, people are in difficulty, not getting adequate supplies of basic food items. And there is a long-standing trading relationship with India, which there is the assumption that supplies will be regularly available. So anytime there is a restriction, and WTO, we are both members of WTO, okay? So WTO rules require that you don't impose restrictions on exports. But then domestic conditions, compulsions might require India, for instance, under some circumstances, to restrict export of any surplus staple food. And so the general answer to your question is that the more open is trade within the South Asia region or within the BIMSTEC region, the better it is for nutrition, for improved diet, and for food systems in the whole region. Individual countries may have different reasons to impose restrictions, but it's better for consumers in the entire South Asian region if there is free flow of trade, import and export of agri-food products with as least restriction as possible, because that improves food systems, that improves nutrition and healthy diets as well.
So how can policymaker balance the need of open trade with ensuring the necessity of consumer need and balance the food safety?
Very difficult question to answer, but that is why we have internationally we have what we call rules-based trade. That is why we have a World Trade Organization which sets the rules of import and export of rules of trade. Now, there are exceptions. So under certain circumstances, there can be some restrictions imposed. But as a general rule of trade among members of WTO, these restrictions, export restriction is non-compliant with WTO rules. Okay, but as I said, there are circumstances in which policymakers have to restrict exports in order to meet domestic requirement. Then it's an exception to the general rule of trade.
So, my last question is, what are the potential risk of prioritize consumer health and consumer health choices over food safety, and how we can mitigate this issue?
Food safety, again, is part of the rules-based trade. There are WTO rules regarding maintaining food safety and providing healthy food. So there are what you call sanitary and phytosanitary requirements that countries exporting food and importing food, they will have to look at. So importers will have to look at whether the imported item qualifies and meets the SPS requirement. Exporters also have to ensure that they follow the WTO rules of, the standards of sanitary and phytosanitary requirements. And of course, each country also, after they meet the WTO requirement, they can also have their own standards, which could be higher than what the WTO requires. So individual countries have their own, and India has very, strong rules of food safety and health requirements. So, but that is part of the rules, and those countries that rely on imports from India or exporting to India will have to meet those standard requirements.